See, the traditional media also has a role to play in the story because the story starts from what the consumers, relevant consumers for that particular brand are doing, and they could be playing, in the traditional media as well. So there could be a specific newspaper reading crowd or a magazine reading crowd which is responding to, let's say, QR codes in an insert, which takes them to a particular digital property where they do something, whatever be the story. So we should not be ignoring any kind of media. I think the issue is that let's not do the exact same opposite of the mistake which I believe many marketers make today, where they look at it in a siloed fashion. They say, okay, I have X amount of money, I have 100 rupees, 70 rupees is for traditional, I'll have 10 for digital, and maybe the other 20 I'll figure out where I need to do it based on my urgent need. Instead, if you were to look at, I have 3 target segments. What are each of those kinds of consumers doing? What are they interfacing with? And consequently, what's the story I should design in order to get to them? And traditional, mobile, social, or physical will all play a particular role in that. And that's the frame of looking at it. Because you will not be able to bring up any segment, or for that matter necessarily achieve anything meaningful without considering all the points. Let's realize that the reason traditional media spending is high is because consumption is actually high proportionately. It is changing, but it's still significant and high. And so, what you do not want to do is buck the trend itself, because the trend is that people are consuming across different kinds of media in different ways. They read Times of India, they go to India Times also. They are still downloading copies of the newspaper on the go and doing something with it. They're looking at classified, sending it across, whatever else. So you will have to capitalize on all of that behavior. So the recommendation obviously is that look across all the media segments and plan your budget based on initiatives and outcomes rather than on media categories, which is what is happening as of now. I'm not necessarily saying the medium is not important, but I'm saying that the medium is at most as important as the consumer himself or herself. And so you need to look at both of them. What we cannot afford to do is make assumptions around the consumer's behavior and just focus on a medium. So it's not enough to say I spent 7% on digital, so I'm cool. You need to be able to say that I am targeting, say, college going youth, and the way I'm targeting them is I'm emphasizing social and digital and mobile, because that target group fundamentally uses that and much less of traditional. Fantastic, that's a good story. But I'm targeting office goers through a heavier mix of traditional with a little bit of mobile, because these are the people who do read their newspapers while on their commute or in their cars or wherever. And they use mobile and digital in a particular way. So you need the consumer, and the specific segment of the consumer has to be king. Medium, quite literally, the word itself means it's a medium for something. And that's, you cannot forget the something and just idealize the medium, and which is a little bit of what seems to be happening. So as long as we're focused on the target segment, and we are saying that and you can measure outcomes. You can say I am 0 in college going youth today. I am going to be 5% of my revenue is going to be there in 3 years. Fantastic. Now I can understand why you want to spend your money in a particular way across different media. But the moment we start having conversations the way accountants report it, where they say 70% of our budgets are towards traditional media, I don't know what to do with that information. I think an accountant can do something with that information. I don't know what to do with it, because it's kind of meaningless, because the other factor is completely missing, which is the consumer. And even from a brand perspective, the CMO, I'm sure, is interested in moving the needle of the brand, and in both in terms of ROI and in terms of outcomes, and saying, is my brand better off today than it was 6 months ago? Vis-a-vis mothers, vis-a-vis teenagers, vis-a-vis office goers, whatever it is, whatever is the target group. Yeah, it is indeed cluttered. When I last looked at it, there were approximately 2,000 odd players who are registered in the e-commerce space alone in India. So obviously, that's like probably 1995 too many, I would think. So that is definitely out there. I think what is happening is there have been 2 different trends which I worked on. One has been the whole excitement around retail, which had started off 3-4 years ago, and you had a bunch of people jumping into that. Some people who had the money jumped into physical retail set up shops and chains and others, and you have all these big chains to look at. And many others started setting up e-commerce entities. Now, e-commerce is a very, very strong trend, no doubt about it. It's huge. Depending on who you want to talk to, is 9 to 12 billion dollars equivalent in the next 2 to 3 years alone in India. So, having said that, the market definitely cannot sustain 2,000 players. It will probably definitely go through a significant shake-up, and you'll settle on probably 4 or 5. If you look at it globally at this point in time, it's you have 2 or 3 key players who kind of play amongst themselves, and even they have their respective niches. Amazon does its own thing. eBay you approach for a very different kind of situation, and there are a ton of e-commerce players who do very specific things. Either they're market specific, mostly in China, say, or you have them who are category specific. You have Net-a-Porter, for example, in UK and now US and Western Europe. They focus on women, specifically in women's fashion. So and there you go. You will have luxury brands who are specifically doing their own thing. Burberry is doing a lot, for example. So you have that scenario pretty much kind of playing out. And so essentially, over the next few months and years, I think you'll probably maximum 2 years, you'll probably see a significant reallocation and reorientation. I call it Darwinism. Darwin has to take over that situation. So on the question of analytics, I don't think India is in a particularly different spot from where the globe is. So I don't think no one is probably strong, but most people, I don't think have necessarily thought it through or have a clear understanding of how we need to fundamentally navigate through the tons of data that we have. And there are some regulatory issues out there. So for example, the biggest sources of data are of private collection of data, I would say, are sitting with telecom carriers, as I said, because they technically have all kinds of data about each of us. There are all kinds of privacy and regulatory issues based on which they cannot use that, or for that matter, offer that. Now, different countries and different players are behaving in different ways. I know for a fact, there are some telecom carriers in Europe who are turning that issue to their advantage, and they're saying, I'm going to basically offer access to that data to other brands, and say, Mr. Let's say, seller of retail goods, if you participate, if you sign on in an agreement with me, I will give you access to the data I have of office goers who travel between 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. through Regent Street Station in London, let's say, and in which case you can specifically craft all your promotions in your flagship store, which is there. And there are a ton of conversations that are happening. The innovation departments in most of these carrier companies are all in it. So there the issue is at most of complexity and a little bit around how do you monetize that data. When you come to generally held kind of marketing data which exists with brands, see, the reason why you have confusion, A, is I think the sheer mass of it, and this is something which we haven't done for a very long time. So I think we are going through a mass hysteria around, oh my goodness, I'm sitting on top of an opportunity, but I don't know how to monetize it, kind of a reaction. Once you start diving in, you will need to be very clear. The problem with data is you need to be clear about what you're looking for. Otherwise, it's like diving into the ocean and saying you can enjoy what you find, but you don't know what you will find. Unless I'm going to go after looking for pearls, and in which case you have to go for specific spots which are known for pearls, and then you have to dive there. And that's the issue with data. I think it's a scale issue largely. I don't think it's a product or a issue, which is what I was saying during the response to the question as well. It's just you have so much data, and so little has been done about it, and so little is clear in terms of what we want out of it. See, the events one is an interesting piece. There seems to be a little bit of a micro trend emerging. We'll have to track this space, but there is probably a micro trend emerging around what we at Sapient Nitro call interactive storytelling, which is a mishmash between event organization, but also a lot of interactive, kind of surfaces, interactive computing, and physical computing, and so on and so forth. So that definitely, some brands are beginning to invest in that. You especially banks with access to data, brands with access to data like banks, like insurance companies, travel companies, So these are people who will probably expose a particular facet of it and say, let's play with it and let's understand what can be done. So that's definitely seems to be kind of evolving. In terms of focusing on it, as I said, we need to brands need to choose how they are going to look at a certain pot of money. Once they look at their budget, what often takes over is the accountant's view, because the accountant's view is typically where is the money going, and the money is going to a certain segment or a certain category which is traditional or digital or social or mobile. The marketer should not fall into that trap, because measuring how much I spent in a particular media is an outcome. You can look at it at the end of the year and say, oh, looks like this year we spent more on digital compared to last year. Great. But starting the year, I don't understand how it's particularly meaningful standalone, where you say, okay, this time we are going to spend 2% more on digital. Based on what? What is more important is what's the outcome I'm looking for, and what's the what's my connection with the consumer which I'm aiming to get towards. So unless the outcome is clear, and this is the golden rule of any business management or metrics, unless you're clear about what you want to do, I don't understand how apportioning a certain pot of money makes sense on a standalone basis.